Now that we've talked about the basic principles of legal writing, it's time to discuss legal citation. Sadly, we can't talk about legal citation without mentioning this thing called Bluebook. Bluebook is a publication of Harvard Law School. It purports to be a manual of uniform legal citations. If you ever have the misfortune of needing to read the Bluebook, you will find that it is quite obtuse, unnecessarily detailed, and frankly demonic. Bluebook was first published in 1926. It is now on its 21st edition, which is a pretty good indication that Bluebook is either a scam, in that Harvard Law School just issues a new edition every time that it wants to fleece law students for more money, or that it just sucks as a manual of legal citations. Probably it's a little bit of both, and if you haven't figured it out already, I'm not a big fan of the Bluebook. I will not be teaching you the Bluebook, but I will teach you generally accepted practices of legal citation. There are two purposes to legal citations. First, to alert reader to the authoritative nature of the source, and two, to provide reader with sufficient information to find the source if necessary. So, first off, to alert the reader as to the authoritative nature of the source. If a case that you're citing comes from the U.S. Supreme Court, that's obviously a more authoritative case than something that comes from, for instance, a state intermediate court. Also, and this is perhaps more important, if the reader does need to look up that source in order to check your facts, you need to provide them enough information to be able to go and find that source. So, to start, we need to learn how to cite cases. So, general practice for citing a case is that you start with the case name, and you do that in italics, comma, and then you have the reporter information, which is what you need to Google in order to find the case that you're looking for. So the reporter information includes a reporter volume, the and this followed by a space, the reporter name and series, followed by another space, and then the first page of the decision, followed by a comma. You then have your pin site. This references the readers to a particular page of the decision that you want them to look at. Then we have parentheses, the court, and finally the year. So, to illustrate this, I'm going to cite a case from the Washington Supreme Court called State v. Blake. So, I put the name, State v. Blake. And if this were in Word, I would italicize it. And then State v. Blake is found in volume 481 of the Pacific Reporter, third series, starting on page 521. And I am going to drop a pin site to the fourth page of the decision, which would appear on page 525. Parentheses. This case is from the Washington Supreme Court, so when it's from a Supreme Court, a state Supreme Court, we just drop the abbreviation for the state. So the abbreviation for Washington is WASH. If this were an appellate court decision, then you would instead do WASH app. But since it's a Supreme Court decision, we don't have the app. And then we do the year. It was decided in 2021. So this is our citation to State v. Blake. And just so you believe me that this is in fact a citation, I'm going to pull up Google here. We're going to search for case law, and I am going to type in 481 P3D 521, and here we get State v. Blake. You'll recall that there are two different types of reporters. There is the official reporter and then the national reporter. For this citation, I cited to the national reporter. I'm going to show you what it would look like if we only cited to the official reporter. So it would look like this. So same case name, obviously, State v. Blake. But the official reporter, it appears in volume 197 of the Washington Supreme Court Reporter. Second series, and starts on page 170. And then the pin site would be 174. And then for this one, since the Washington Supreme Court Reporter only publishes cases from the Washington Supreme Court, I don't need to have the court in the parentheses, and I am instead just going to write the year. Now, if you want to be very comprehensive, you can include a citation that contains a citation to both the official and national reporters. So if you wanted to do that, it would look like so. State v. Blake. (197) Wash 2D 170 174. Don't forget the comma. 481 P3D 521. (525) parenthesis. And since I have a citation to the official reporter, I don't need to include the court. 2021. There you go. So that's what it would look like. This is probably the best way of doing citations. But in the age of online legal research, it's not really necessary because no one is actually looking up these citations in the printed text of the Washington or Pacific Reporter. Everyone is just Googling it on Lexis or Westlaw, and either one of these will bring you to the case, regardless of what subscription you have. So it's sort of an archaic relic from the days that we use printed text. Um, if you do choose to just use one or the other, what I typically do is if I am citing a case in the jurisdiction from the jurisdiction that I'm practicing in, I will usually cite to the official reporter, and then if I am citing extra jurisdictional material, then I'll cite to the national reporter. It doesn't really matter, but I think it just looks nicer to do it that way. Okay, so we need to also talk about subsequent history. So you'll recall when we discussed the structure of the judiciary, remember that a case starts in trial court, then it goes up to an appellate court, and then it can go up to the Supreme Court, either of the state or of the United States. And so sometimes you get a case that you want to cite that comes from a court of appeals. So maybe the court of appeals issued a decision, but then that decision went up to the state Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court issued its own decision in the same case. So when that happens and you want to cite a decision from a lower court, especially the intermediate court, you need to address the subsequent history. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, so to cite subsequent history, we again start with the case name, comma, and then the reporter information, comma, your pin site, parenthesis, court, year, and then we have another comma, and we are going to put a signal, so it is usually either affirmed or reversed. So if the case went up on appeal, and then, or if a appellate court issued a decision, and then it went up to the Supreme Court, then the Supreme Court uh, either affirmed or reversed that decision. And then once you do that, you have the citation for the Supreme Court case, and this will be you usually don't need to put the name because the name is going to be the same since it's part of the same case. It's just up at a higher court. So you just have the reporter information, and then you also don't need the pin site, and you'll just have court and year. So let's do an example of this. So there is a state case called State v. Taylor. A decision was issued in this case by both the Washington Court of Appeals and the Washington Supreme Court. And its citation, I'm just going to cite to the official reporter, is 114 Washington App 600. We'll put in a pin site to page 602, parenthesis. Since the reporter name tells us both the jurisdiction and the court that decided the case, I don't need to include that information in the parenthesis. This case was decided in 2002. And it was affirmed in volume 150 of the Washington Supreme Court Reporter, second series, page 599. And once more, since this reporter tells the court information, we don't need to include it in the parenthesis. We just need the year, which in this case was 2003. And then close parentheses. So this is how you cite a case with subsequent history. All right, so now that we know how to do a citation to a case, we'll talk about including a parenthetical. So there are, after you have cited the case, oftentimes you include an additional parenthetical that says something about the case, and I am going to show you what that looks like here. So I'm going to return to that case, State v. Blake, italicized, comma. I'm going to cite the reporter, and I'm going to go back to the national reporter, so 481 Pacific 3rd, page 521, and drop a pin site to page 534, parenthesis. Since the Pacific Reporter doesn't tell us what court this opinion comes from, I am going to drop in the signal that it is for Washington, which means the Washington Supreme Court, and then the year 2021, close parenthesis. All right, so now I am going to make a parenthetical. And this goes right after the citation, and there's a couple different ways to do these. So first, I'm going to say holding strict liability, possession, unconstitutional. All right, and then close parenthesis and then period. And so this this parenthetical tells us that this case, State v. Blake, held that strict liability possession was unconstitutional. I realize I misspelled unconstitutional. Unconstitutional, close parenthesis, period. Holding strict liability possession unconstitutional. Okay, so that's what Blake held. Now, notice in this parenthetical that I have started with the word holding. So if you're doing a parenthetical this way, traditionally you want to start with an ing verb. So holding, citing, uh, adjudicating, something of that nature, an ing word. If you don't want to do that, then there is another option. And the other option is to do a quotation in the form of a complete sentence. So in this case, the portion that I want to quote doesn't start in the sentence, so I drop a bracket, capital T, the simple drug possession statute, dot, 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 violates the due process clauses. And when I was in law school, they taught us to if you're quoting the portion of a sentence and it doesn't end in the text, it doesn't end on a period. So in the original case, this sentence goes on, but I just want to quote this portion of it. They would teach us to do a three-dot ellipse and then end on a period. So having four periods, I hate that, uh, and I don't think it looks good. So I always just drop a bracketed period, and that signals to my reader that that period is not in the original. I am adding that. In the original text, this sentence goes on, but I am only quoting this portion, and close parenthesis, or close quote, close parenthesis, period. So that would be the parenthetical cite for a complete sentence that is a quotation. So those are traditionally the two ways that you do parentheticals. If you want to deviate from that and do something special, you certainly can, although I would say for the most part, if you're not doing it this way, you may want to just think about whether you can put the parenthetical in the actual sentence rather than in a quotate or rather than in a citation. We can use parentheticals for other things other than just making statements about the case, or about the contents of the case, I should say. So let's say, for instance, so I'm going to erase that. And instead of page 534, I'm going to instead cite to page 535. And this is the page that the dissent begins on, so the dissenting opinion. And so if you're ever quoting anything other than a majority opinion, you drop a parenthetical. And in this case, it was Justice Stevens. So I would write Justice Stevens, comma, and then J for justice, comma, dissenting. Okay, so this is how you signal if it's something other than a majority opinion. You write the justice's last name, comma, J, period, comma, and then dissenting, or if it were in a concurring opinion, you could do concurring. If it's a plurality opinion, you just write plurality opinion in the parentheses.